The galaxy had a name for them, the Meteor Fields. To any who had lived and traveled long enough among the stars, the name alone was enough to strike fear into the hearts of even the bravest explorers. These were no ordinary asteroid belts, no mere clusters of wayward space rocks. The meteor fields were alive with chaos, a violent tapestry of destruction stretching across dozens of light years. Asteroids collided with terrifying frequency, sparking massive bursts of energy that could reduce a heavily armored warship to slag in seconds. Comets, twisted by gravitational anomalies, tore themselves apart in spectacular displays of lethal radiation and high-velocity debris. Every particle in the fields carried the potential to kill. Centuries of interstellar travel had taught civilizations caution. Entire fleets from the Andari Empire had vanished here, their disappearance a mystery for decades until the wreckage was discovered, scattered across hundreds of kilometers of space. Once thriving, trade colonies orbiting resource-rich planets had been reduced to ghostly husks, their populations vaporized by impacts or trapped in the field's deadly radiation belts. Researchers and scientists from the Arvax Council tried to map safe routes, only to find that even a single miscalculation could trigger catastrophe. The collective wisdom of the galaxy, drawn from countless species over millennia, settled on one universal truth: the meteor fields were impassable. They were, as the Council solemnly decreed, certain death. Every species that had attempted to penetrate the meteor fields had failed. Attempts ranged from heavily armed military fleets hoping to carve a path through sheer firepower to explorers relying on advanced predictive algorithms. Ships were shredded, crews obliterated, and records lost to the void. Legends told of vessels that had vanished mid-transit, their last transmissions reduced to fragments of screams and sensor warnings. The fields were more than a physical hazard. They were a gauntlet designed by the universe to remind civilizations of their limits. Across the stars, parents warned their children, fleets instructed cadets, and traders rerouted routes that would have otherwise taken decades off their journeys. And yet, despite every warning, despite every record of catastrophe, humans looked at the meteor fields with the same curiosity and stubbornness that had defined their species for thousands of years. For humans, impossibility was not a barrier, it was a challenge. They had once crossed oceans without maps, climbed mountains when others had turned back, and survived the harshest deserts and tundras the galaxy or even their own homeworld could offer. Humanity was audacious, sometimes reckless, often maddeningly optimistic, and infinitely resourceful. Where other species saw death, humans saw an opportunity to learn, to conquer, to thrive. It began quietly, with small probes and unmanned drones sent to study the edges of the fields. These drones moved faster than anything any other civilization had dared to build, using rapid course adjustments to survive collisions that would have vaporized conventional craft. Sensors recorded impacts, gravitational fluctuations, and radiation spikes in real time, transmitting a torrent of data back to the human command centers orbiting nearby systems. What other species had seen as random chaos, humans began to understand as patterns, complex but predictable, if approached with patience and ingenuity. Scientists called it dynamic chaos, mapping, a term that made veteran explorers laugh and bureaucrats nervous. Humans weren't just mapping space, they were learning to anticipate it, to see the rhythm behind destruction itself. And once they understood the rhythm, the next step came naturally. Humans began imagining a path where none should exist, a corridor through what the galaxy had decreed unpassable. They spoke of corridors, not routes, of safe channels through the storm of death that could support not just small exploratory vessels, but entire fleets if they dared. Alien species observed from a distance, mostly in disbelief. It seemed impossible. The Hydrathi, a species known for their obsession with precise calculations, openly mocked the endeavor. No algorithm can predict the randomness of the fields, their lead navigator had declared. No craft, no matter how advanced, could survive the kinetic energy alone. Yet humans persisted. With every failure, they adjusted. With every miscalculation, they learned. Whereas other species had succumbed to fear, humans cultivated resilience, turning mistakes into lessons and danger into opportunity. By the time the first manned missions approached the fields, the galaxy had already begun to notice. Star systems that had once regarded humans with mild curiosity now watched with wary fascination. Small vessels, barely larger than transport shuttles, entered the outer edges of the meteor fields, their hulls flickering as tiny meteors struck and shields flared against the deadly radiation. Communications were tense, crew voices steady but alert, and yet, somehow, these fragile ships did not explode. They moved like dancers between falling hammers, each movement deliberate, precise, and terrifyingly confident. Humans called it courage. Some other species called it madness. The truth was somewhere in between. It was a combination of meticulous calculation, rapid adaptation, and an instinctive understanding of risk that no one had truly seen before. Humans did not merely attempt survival. They planned for failure and adapted in ways that seemed almost instinctual. In the face of death itself, they were fluid, fast, and uncompromising. As the first vessels disappeared deeper into the fields, the whispers began across the galaxy. Perhaps humans are more than reckless, the elders said. Perhaps they are something else entirely. For every species that had been bound by fear, human audacity was a revelation. The meteor fields, a place that had claimed millions of lives across thousands of years, would soon face a force unlike anything it had encountered before. The galaxy's warnings, the tales of death and devastation, the careful counsels of the most brilliant minds, all of it now stood as a backdrop to a species that refused to acknowledge impossibility. And somewhere, in the command center, orbiting the nearest star, a human captain leaned over the navigation console, eyes fixed on the swirling chaos ahead, and whispered to their crew, almost as an afterthought, "Do not be afraid. We're just getting started." In that moment, the galaxy's definition of impossible began to crumble. The meteor fields, long whispered about in terror and awe, were about to be challenged by a species that refused to surrender to death. Humans had arrived, and the fields would never be the same again. The humans did not hesitate. Where the galaxy saw impassable chaos, they saw a problem to solve. The first manned mission into the meteor fields was modest small craft, light crews, reinforced shields, and nothing more than basic cargo drones. To other species, it seemed like suicide. Even veteran alien navigators shook their heads in disbelief as the fragile human ships glided toward the swirling asteroid storm. Every meter forward was a gamble. Every second demanded absolute precision. Yet the humans moved with the certainty of purpose that no other species had ever displayed. "Captain, the asteroid cluster ahead is immense," Lieutenant Kara reported, her voice tight, fingers dancing over the console as sensors flared warnings. Our shields won't hold against sustained impacts. The captain, a seasoned veteran with streaks of gray in his hair, leaned forward and smiled faintly. "Not our problem," he said, voice calm over the comm. "We're not here to dodge rocks. We're here to make a path." And that was exactly what they intended to do. The human approach combined ingenuity, technology, and audacity. High-velocity mining drones were deployed first, flitting between asteroids like metallic swallows, their plasma cutters, and kinetic disruptors reshaping the rocks, redirecting massive fragments into stable orbits. The drones carved tunnels through dense clusters, breaking apart particularly deadly masses before they could threaten the mission. Simultaneously, construction vessels moved behind, laying navigational beacons that emitted stabilizing fields and real-time hazard mapping for ships that would follow. Every maneuver was a dance with death. Meteors the size of mountains tumbled unpredictably, and every collision created shockwaves that could obliterate an unshielded vessel. Radiation belts fluctuated without warning, sometimes spreading across light years in seconds. And yet, humans thrived in the chaos. They adapted faster than the sensors could calculate, improvising maneuvers that alien AI could not predict. What other species had abandoned in terror, humans approached with relentless curiosity. It took time. Decades, in fact, of trial and error. Early missions ended in partial failure. Ships were lost, drones destroyed, crews injured. But the humans did not falter. Each loss became a lesson, every miscalculation a step closer to mastery. Engineers reworked shielding technology to withstand unprecedented radiation bursts. Navigators developed algorithms that could predict asteroid movements in real time, adjusting ship courses by microseconds to avoid collisions. Crews trained in ways no other species had conceived simulations that made them familiar with chaos itself. When the first human-led corridor through the fields was finally completed, it was not a simple route. It was a meticulously crafted highway, weaving between massive asteroids and comet debris, shielded by magnetic fields and illuminated by thousands of beacons. The corridor was wide enough to allow fleets to pass, yet narrow enough to challenge the bravest pilots. It was a path that no species could have imagined, a blend of science and audacity, of meticulous planning and instinctive daring. The first alien observers were skeptical, some openly mocking the effort. The Idrathi, known for their obsession with precision and probability, watched as human ships maneuvered effortlessly through areas that had claimed thousands of their scouts in the past. "They cannot survive this," muttered one ambassador, eyes wide as a human transport glided past a spinning comet without even a scratch. But they did survive. And then they thrived. Humans did not just create a path, they reshaped the very environment. Dangerous debris was stabilized, radiation bursts mitigated, and micro-collisions redirected before they could threaten ships. The Meteor Fields, once a chaotic death trap, became a living, navigable space. Every high-velocity maneuver, every redirected asteroid, every beacon lit in the void became a testament to human ingenuity. "Do you see it?" the captain asked the crew as they sailed through a newly cleared corridor. "Every rock, every comet, every burst of radiation, we're not running from it. We're controlling it. This is our highway." The term spread quickly, human highways. Not merely routes, but corridors of survival built in the deadliest regions of space. Entire fleets could pass through safely. Trade routes that had once taken centuries were now days away, and the once feared meteor fields became arteries of connection, commerce, and exploration. Where other species had seen death, humans saw opportunity. Where the galaxy had whispered warnings, humans built highways. They did not merely survive the fields, they transformed them, proving that audacity, intelligence, and perseverance could rewrite even the rules of death itself. And so, the first corridor through the meteor fields stood as a monument, a gleaming ribbon of light amidst chaos, a place where humans alone had dared to tread, and where the impossible became not just possible, but inevitable. The first outsiders to witness the human highways were not soldiers, nor explorers, they were traders. The Hydrathi, a species celebrated across the galaxy for their obsession with precision, probability, and risk assessment, had arrived to observe, skeptical and anxious. Their fleet, massive and sleek, normally exuded confidence. Every maneuver was calculated to microsecond precision. Every crew member trained to anticipate even the slightest deviation in trajectory. And yet, as they approached the outskirts of the meteor fields, their sensors flared with warnings that they had never imagined possible. "What in the void?" whispered the lead ambassador, his elongated wings trembling as he adjusted the viewing panels. The Hydrathi ships were dwarfed by the asteroid storms, spinning comets, and radiation bursts that surrounded them. This region, it should have destroyed them years ago. And there they were, humans, navigating with a grace that defied comprehension. Small, seemingly fragile ships glided between massive asteroids, their shields flaring in brilliant bursts as debris struck and bounced harmlessly off. Drones zipped through the chaos like swarms of metallic insects, redirecting tumbling rocks into safe orbits and shattering hazardous comets into harmless fragments. Navigation beacons marked safe corridors, illuminating paths with pulsing lights that pierced the void. Each human vessel moved as if it were a single organism, anticipating the deadly chaos around it, adapting to every change and emerging unscathed. The Hydrathi ambassador's voice shook as he spoke to his crew. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. No probability function could account for this level of survival. "They are not surviving," one young navigator replied, awe-stricken. "They are dominating." For the first time in recorded galactic history, a species was not merely surviving the meteor fields, they were rewriting them. Humans were not content to avoid death, they actively shaped it. Dangerous asteroids were redirected, radiation bursts mitigated, and volatile comets were shattered or slowed before they could become threats. The chaotic storm itself seemed to bend to human will, flowing around their ships rather than against them. "What are they doing?" muttered another Hydrathi observer, eyes wide, as a human construction vessel cut a massive asteroid in half, then deployed beacons to stabilize its remnants. "This is not exploration. This is control." The realization settled slowly, heavy and profound. Humans did not calculate risk the way the Hydrathi did, nor did they rely on algorithms or probability matrices alone. They had a different approach, fluid, instinctive, fearless. They moved not with caution, but with confidence, adapting in real time to a landscape that had destroyed every other species that dared enter it. Where the Hydrathi analyzed, humans acted. Where the Council had issued warnings, humans issued solutions. As the fleet moved deeper into the corridor, the ambassador gasped. The once feared fields, a region that had claimed thousands of lives across countless generations, had been transformed. Beacons glowed like constellations in the void. Corridors carved between tumbling rocks allowed safe passage for even the largest vessels, and the chaotic energy of the fields, once random and deadly, was now predictable within the parameters humans had imposed. "They're building highways," whispered the ambassador, disbelief heavy in his voice. "Through certain death, they're actually building highways." Other species took note immediately. Messages, transmissions, and records of human progress spread like wildfire. Scholars, traders, and military strategists alike were forced to admit that humans were operating on a level no one had anticipated. Where previous civilizations had fled in terror, humans had advanced, creating infrastructure in the deadliest place in known space. It was audacity, genius, and courage wrapped into one, a species refusing to bow to the limits the galaxy had declared immutable. Even among humans, there was a quiet pride. Crew members spoke in low tones as they navigated the corridors, aware that every asteroid redirected, every beacon deployed, was a message to the galaxy humans would not accept impossible. The aliens' awe was secondary, the humans' own resolve was primary. And yet, the effect on the galaxy was immediate and profound. Ships that had once avoided the meteor fields for centuries now considered approaching, wondering if perhaps they too could survive, if perhaps human methods could be learned and replicated. Legends of human highways spread, painting humanity not as reckless, but as something greater, a species capable of transforming death into opportunity, chaos into structure, and impossibility into achievement. By the time the first Idrathi fleet exited the corridor, their ambassador's words carried the weight of centuries of fear. The humans, they are not like us. They are something else entirely. In that moment, the galaxy's perception of humanity changed forever. A species that had once been dismissed as curious, stubborn, or reckless had shown the galaxy that audacity paired with ingenuity could overcome what even the wisest civilizations had deemed certain death. The Meteor Fields, long a symbol of the universe's limits, had met its match. And somewhere in the heart of the fields, the human captain looked out from the bridge, watching alien eyes widen in astonishment, and whispered with a quiet, defiant smile, "Welcome to our highways." The ripples of human audacity spread faster than any transmission could carry. Word of the human highways through the meteor fields traveled from system to system, leaving awe, disbelief, and a touch of fear in its wake. Across the galaxy, civilizations that had once regarded humans as unpredictable, reckless, or inconsequential now paused to reassess. Every trade guild, every exploratory council, every fleet command recognized that something extraordinary was happening. The humans were not merely surviving. They were reshaping the very architecture of interstellar travel. Trade routes that had taken decades to navigate around the dangerous fields were suddenly reduced to weeks, even days. Merchant fleets previously restricted to safe zones now dared venture near systems that had been isolated for centuries. Entire economies shifted as resources previously inaccessible became attainable. Planets that had once languished in the shadows of the galaxy were suddenly connected to thriving hubs of commerce. Goods, information, and ideas flowed through corridors carved from the chaos of death itself. Human innovation had made what the galaxy feared into something indispensable. Not everyone welcomed this change. The Galactic Council, a coalition of hundreds of species who prided themselves on order, prudence, and caution, convened an emergency session. Delegates from across the stars argued heatedly. Some feared that human activity might destabilize the delicate gravitational balances of the meteor fields, leading to unforeseen disasters. Others worried that by building highways, humans were overstepping, asserting dominance in a space no one had dared enter for millennia. "We must regulate them," insisted a delegate from the Elvani species, their bioluminescent wings flickering with agitation. "They are tampering with forces beyond understanding. This could lead to catastrophe for the entire region." But even the counselors had to admit the undeniable. Evidence could not be ignored. Fleets that had traversed the corridors emerged unscathed. Planets previously unreachable were now accessible. Trade flowed where it had never flowed before. Scientific teams confirmed the stability of redirected asteroids, the safety of shielded corridors, and the astonishing efficiency of human-designed navigation systems. And above all, no other species had yet demonstrated the audacity or ingenuity to replicate it. An elder diplomat, representing a species whose history spanned over 10,000 years, finally spoke with a mixture of wonder and resignation. "Humans do not follow the rules of survival as we know them. They do not merely adapt, they invent new laws to govern existence itself. Where others see death, they see opportunity. And sometimes, those opportunities work." As this realization spread, the galaxy began to shift. Systems that had been considered dead zones became hubs of exploration. Scientific expeditions followed the highways, studying comets, asteroids, and the cosmic storms that humans had mastered. Ambitious colonies formed along the edges of the corridors. Settlements that would have been suicidal a generation ago, now thriving thanks to human ingenuity. Even species previously hostile to humans found themselves relying grudgingly on these highways for travel, trade, and survival. The psychological impact was perhaps the most profound. For millennia, the meteor fields had been whispered about with fear and dread, a place no intelligent species could survive. Human action had shattered that myth. Across the galaxy, species began to reconsider what they considered impossible. Engineers, explorers, and scholars asked new questions. Could the impossible be mapped, tamed, and transformed? Could danger be converted into opportunity? Humans had provided the proof. Among the humans themselves, the work continued unabated. Every corridor through the fields was reinforced. Every new highway extended further, linking systems that had never seen contact. Human crews moved like artists in the void, sculpting space itself to suit their purpose. And as each corridor was completed, more fleets followed, learning, adapting, and sometimes failing, but always under the guiding example of human audacity. Trade, exploration, and diplomacy began to rely on these highways. Entire civilizations, once isolated by natural barriers, now interacted at speeds and scales previously unimaginable. Scientific discoveries accelerated. Cultural exchanges flourished. Alliances formed not out of necessity, but inspired by the sheer demonstration of what one species could accomplish when it refused to accept limits. The galaxy, once cautious and fearful, had begun to admire, and in some cases, envy the humans. Where once they had been dismissed as reckless and impulsive, They were now regarded as pioneers, visionaries, and even, in whispered tones, saviors of opportunity in a universe too often constrained by fear. And yet, for all this admiration, humans themselves remained quietly focused. They did not seek glory or recognition. Every asteroid redirected, every beacon deployed, every corridor cleared was simply a step forward, a solution to a problem that the galaxy had deemed unsolvable. They built not for fame, not for reward, but because the challenge existed and because humanity never accepted that impossible was permanent. By the time the first human highways were fully operational, stretching across light years of once deadly meteor fields, the galaxy had already changed. Fear had been replaced with cautious respect. Isolation had been replaced with connection. And the universe itself had been reminded, once more, that humans were not a species to be underestimated. The meteor fields, long whispered about in dread and legend, were no longer just a name to inspire fear. They had become proof of audacity, ingenuity, and the singular human will to shape even death itself into opportunity. The meteor fields, once whispered about in terror and legend, had been transformed. What was once synonymous with certain death had become something entirely different, a testament to human audacity, ingenuity, and determination. Entire fleets now traversed corridors that humans had carved through chaos itself, their navigation guided by the beacons humans had placed and the lessons humans had taught. For the first time, the galaxy saw the impossible turned into reality, and it was humans who had done it. Where other species had fled, humans had persisted. Where generations of civilizations had warned, humans had acted. And where death had once claimed all who dared enter, humans had built pathways that connected distant systems, reigniting trade, exploration, and diplomacy across regions long considered dead zones. The galaxy could no longer dismiss them. Humans were no longer simply a species. They were pioneers, creators, and legends, carving their legacy across the very fabric of space. Stories began to circulate. Merchant fleets recounted the first time they passed through the corridors unscathed, how massive asteroids that should have obliterated their ships were now safely stabilized. Scientists marveled at the technology that allowed humans to manipulate gravity fields, redirect comets, and create shields capable of withstanding the deadliest radiation. And diplomats, ever cautious, began to regard humans not with suspicion, but with awe and respect. Humanity had done what no other species could. Even the Galactic Council, once wary of human intervention, came to acknowledge their accomplishments. Rules were rewritten, protocols revised, and policies adjusted to account for this new reality. Humans were a force that reshaped the galaxy, not simply reacted to it. Some still worried, some still feared, but none could deny the evidence before their eyes. Human highways were no accident. They were proof of vision, ingenuity, and the relentless refusal to accept impossibility. The legacy extended beyond trade and exploration. Humans had changed the galaxy's very perception of survival. Species long bound by fear of the unknown now questioned their limits. Where death had once been final, humans had shown that it could be challenged, managed, and even overcome. The audacity of one species became a spark of inspiration for all. Across countless worlds, beings whispered the same words. If humans can survive the meteor fields, what else is possible? For humans, the work was ongoing. Every highway was extended, every beacon upgraded, every dangerous storm charted with new precision. They did not seek glory. Their motivation was the challenge itself. Every asteroid redirected, every corridor cleared, every ship safely guided through the once deadly fields was a testament to what humanity valued most: resilience, creativity, and the courage to face the impossible. Legends began to form. Children on distant worlds learned of the first human missions through the meteor fields, tales of brave crews navigating impossible dangers and carving lighted paths through chaos. Artists, historians, and storytellers depicted the highways as rivers of luminescence in the void, a symbol of humanity's ability to impose order upon the universe itself. Even the stars seemed to recognize it, their scattered debris now corralled into human-made pathways, shining as evidence of a species that refused to bow to fear. And so, the meteor fields became more than a corridor, they became a monument. A monument not of stone or metal, but of willpower and intellect, a living testament to what humans could achieve. Ships from countless species passed safely through, guided by human design, and in doing so, they carried with them the story of a species that had dared to rewrite the rules of survival. In the endless dark of the void, the highways glimmered a reminder that humanity did not simply survive the universe's deadliest trials, they transformed them. The galaxy's warnings had once echoed with fear. Now, they echoed with admiration, awe, and the quiet realization that humans had changed everything. Somewhere at the forefront, the human captain looked out across the corridor, watching fleets glide past the beacons they had built, listening to the faint hum of navigation systems alive in the void. He smiled, a small, quiet gesture, and spoke softly, not for the aliens or the council, but for the crew beside him, for the species he represented. Death is not the end. It's the beginning. And we are just getting started. The meteor fields would never be feared the same way again. The impossible had been conquered, not with brute force, but with intellect, courage, and human will. Highways stretched across chaos, and through them, humanity's legacy shone brighter than any star. The galaxy had called it certain death, but humans had built highways, and the universe would never forget it.